I never thought I'd share this story, but I need to get it off my chest. I'm Liam, 26 years old, and this tale begins long before I realized the depths of betrayal a family could reach. Growing up, it was clear that my older brother, Jason, was the favored child, the golden boy who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the spare, who never quite seemed to get the same warmth or admiration. As kids, the differences between us weren't as obvious to me. Jason was 2 years older, and I didn't think much of it when our parents gave him the best toys or all their attention. He was the one they paraded proudly to friends and relatives, while I was, well, just me. It was subtle at first, but by the time I was in middle school, it became glaringly apparent that Jason was their pride and joy, while I was the kid who did as he was told, shouldered chores, and stayed out of trouble. By the time I was 15, I was already thinking about the future. I wanted to start my own business someday. A small, cozy cafe where people could enjoy great coffee, appreciate local art, and feel like they belonged somewhere special. It felt like my escape plan, my way out of a home that often felt like a hotel where I didn't quite belong. I started working at a local grocery store part time, saving every cent I could, sacrificing weekends and late nights to build up my funds. Meanwhile, Jason was on a completely different trajectory. After high school, he decided that college wasn't for him. Fair enough, college isn't for everyone. But instead of finding a job or even making plans, he just floated. My parents, of course, enabled this with unending patience and financial support. He lived at home, rent free, with everything handed to him. If he wanted to go on a road trip with friends, my dad would slip him $500, no questions asked. I could never understand it, but I knew better than to question their priorities. The few times I tried to bring it up, to ask why Jason got everything handed to him while I was constantly working to scrape by, my parents brushed it off. They'd say, Jason's still figuring things out, Liam. He just needs a little time. Time was the one luxury I'd never been afforded, though. For me, it was all work, no excuses. Over the years, I watched Jason coast through life, doing nothing to help our family, contribute to household chores, or even get a steady job. Meanwhile, I was balancing school, a part time job, and all the household chores they assigned me. I didn't complain. I thought that maybe, just maybe, if I kept being responsible, if I kept proving myself, my parents might see me the way they saw Jason. But as the years passed, it became clear that I would always be second best. Eventually, I saved up $37,000. It had taken years of working every shift I could, missing out on hanging out with friends, skipping trips and concerts, just so I could build up this nest egg. This was supposed to be my ticket to a new life, my way out. I didn't have much, but I had that money, and it represented everything I'd sacrificed and worked for. But all of that changed the day I decided to tell my parents about my plans. I thought they'd be proud of me. I thought maybe this time they'd see my hard work and determination. I sat them down one evening after dinner, nervous but excited, and shared my dream of opening a cafe. I explained how I'd been saving for years, how much it meant to me to make something of myself, to create a place where people could feel at home. My mom just nodded, looking distracted, while my dad barely glanced up from his phone. After a long silence, my mom finally spoke. Jason could really use some help right now. Maybe you could lend him some of that money you've saved. I was stunned. It was like they hadn't even heard me. Jason? Help Jason? He wasn't working. He wasn't even trying. How did he deserve any of this money? When I questioned them, trying to understand why they thought Jason needed the money more than I did. They brushed me off. Family helps each other out, Liam, my mom said, her tone full of reproach. He's your brother. You're being selfish. Selfish. That word stung more than I could have imagined. Here I was working and saving for years while Jason coasted through life without a care in the world. And somehow I was the selfish one. I stormed out before I could say something I'd regret. But I knew right then that things would never change. They would always take Jason's side, always view him as deserving and me as disposable. A few months passed, and I kept my money locked away in a metal box under my bed. I'd managed to save a bit more, but I was constantly on edge, worried that my parents or Jason might find out and try to guilt me into giving it to him. Then one night, the unthinkable happened. I came home late from a double shift, exhausted, and went to check on my savings, only to find the box empty. All $37,000 gone. Panic flooded through me. I tore through my room, hoping I'd misplaced it somehow, but deep down I knew. Jason had taken it. The next morning, I confronted him, and he didn't even try to deny it. Mom and Dad said it was fine, he shrugged. They said you'd help me out. Help him out? By stealing everything I'd worked for? I could barely contain my rage as I confronted my parents, only to be met with blank stares. He's your brother, Liam, my mom said, as though that somehow made it all better. He needed it more than you did. That was the final straw. I packed my things and left that day, knowing I could never return. They'd taken everything from me, given it to Jason, and hadn't even blinked. It was clear to me then that, in their eyes, Jason was the only child who mattered. For the next few months, I was on my own, staying on friends' couches, bouncing between cheap motels, and working extra shifts just to make ends meet. I had nothing left from the money I'd saved, and starting over felt like climbing a mountain with no summit in sight. But I was determined. I'd rebuild my life without them. I'd thought things couldn't possibly get worse after Jason stole my savings, but I was wrong. 6 months after I left, my family's audacity hit an all-time high. I'd managed to scrape together enough for a small, one-bedroom apartment across town, just big enough for me and my dreams. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I worked tirelessly to keep up with the rent and bills. Jason, meanwhile, continued to live off my parents, who now fully funded his life. They even bought him a new car, which I only found out about through a mutual friend in our old neighborhood. It hurt to know they were still bending over backward for him while I struggled, but I tried to push it out of my mind. I was free of them, and that was enough. Or so I thought. One night, while I was sitting in my apartment, my phone rang. It was my mom. I hesitated, considering letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the best of me. Maybe, just maybe, she was calling to apologize. Liam, we need to talk, she said, her voice tense with urgency. Jason's found this amazing apartment downtown, but he doesn't have the deposit. I know things were rough after everything that happened, but maybe you could help him out with a loan. The audacity was staggering. After everything they'd already taken, after all the sacrifices I'd made, they wanted me to help him again. I couldn't believe it. No, I said firmly. I'm not giving him anything. I've worked hard for this, and I'm done helping him. My mom sighed, as though I were the unreasonable one. You're being selfish, Liam. It's just a deposit. You'll make it back, but Jason really needs this. He's been through a lot. Jason? Been through a lot? The same Jason who had stolen everything I'd saved and was now living off our parents? It was infuriating, Dad. There's nothing left for him, I said, and I hung up, feeling a surge of anger and relief. For once, I'd stood my ground, and it felt like a weight had lifted. Over the next few months, I focused solely on my job and rebuilding my savings, this time with an ironclad resolve to protect it from anyone who might try to take it away. I was finally free, but the memories and bitterness lingered, making it hard to fully let go. Then, one afternoon, I came home from work to find a letter taped to my apartment door. It was from my landlord, notifying me that my rent payment had been reversed. Confused, I went to the bank the next morning, only to find that someone had accessed my account and withdrawn nearly $3,000. I need to guess who it was. Jason. Somehow, he'd gotten my account information, likely with my parents' help, and had stolen from me again. I called my mom, furious. "Did you give Jason my account information?" I demanded that. "He needed the money, Liam," she said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "You weren't willing to help, so we had to do something." It was like being punched in the gut. After everything they'd already done, after taking everything I'd saved, they were willing to do this again. I felt a deep, crushing sense of betrayal as I told my mom that I was done with all of them, blocked their numbers, and cut off all contact. In the weeks that followed, I worked even harder, taking on extra shifts to replace the money that had been stolen. But the emotional toll was far worse than the financial one. I couldn't believe that my own family, my own parents, could betray me like this. Months passed in a haze of work and quiet nights spent alone. I missed having a family, missed the idea of people who cared for me, but I knew I could never go back. For the first time, I was truly on my own, free from their demands, free from the constant disappointment, but at a cost I never imagined I'd have to pay.